Hello BookTube, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann, and today I want to talk about this absolutely fascinating book that I read in the month of February. It's called Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals. It's by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, who is a Black feminist writer and thinker, and has had I think, lifelong interest and fascination with marine mammals, meaning whales, dolphins, seals, even sea otters make an appearance in this book. And in the course of learning about them from a Western science and biological standpoint, she came to realize that a lot of the sort of dehumanizing and distancing language that we use to talk about kind of science and biological organisms in general, and marine mammals as scientific objects of study, really kind of paralleled with her experience of being a Black woman and the history of Black people in the U.S., going back to the slave trade. And so she started to share what she was learning about marine mammals as a series of social media posts where she would share some of the biology of different species. She would often talk about some sort of the history of science, of how species came to be named, often in very colonial, extractive ways, and part of a colonial and extractive history, and would just kind of call out kind of these processes and like mistreatments of marine mammals, and then really reflect on it and bring it into her experience as a queer Black woman coming from a legacy of colonialization and enslavement. And so those social media posts were sharing kind of her own journey towards really developing kind of a spiritual kinship almost with marine mammals, and posing reflective queries for other people to just kind of really start thinking creatively about what it means to be human versus not human, and just kind of these commonalities among all life. So this is creative nonfiction, so it is kind of grounded in biological sciences, but then includes kind of her reflections and some imaginings about the species that she talks about. So I'm not going to be able to talk about it very well, so I actually just wanted to read a little bit of this book. So first, I just wanted to include a few sentences, in her own words about what she's doing by taking the biology of, reading a guidebook about marine mammals and then putting it into this sort of more creative writing format. So she says, "My hope, my grand poetic intervention here is to move from identification, also known as that process through which we say what is what, like which dolphin is that over there and what are its properties, to identification in italics. That process through which we expand our empathy and the boundaries of who we are become more fluid, because we identify with the experience of someone different, maybe someone of a whole different so-called species." And then I just wanted to read a little bit from a section of reflections that she calls "Remember." So I don't know if I should really call it a chapter. I guess it's technically a chapter. She's divided it into sort of themes around what she wants the people reading these reflections to be thinking about and querying as they read them. So there's a whole section called "Remember." It's toward the beginning of the book, engaging with kind of memory and history. Just a quick note about context before I read this first passage. The word Anguilla is going to show up in it, which is a small island territory in the Caribbean. I believe it's currently a British territory. And Alexis Pauline Gumbs's grandparents owned land there for quite a while. And so she has a strong family tie to that island. So that will be mentioned in this passage. "Sometimes you will see an ocean dolphin in the river. One day, standing on a dock in the Combahee River, looking for Harriet Tubman on the 149th anniversary of her successful uprising, my partner, Sengodare, and I saw 3 Atlantic bottlenose dolphins. Message received. A year later, we returned as 21 Black feminists to honor the 150th anniversary of the Combahee River Raid together at the Mobile Homecoming Project's Combahee Pilgrimage. Decades earlier, my grandmother, Lydia Gumbs, got a message from some Atlantic bottlenose dolphins, too. They inspired her design of the revolutionary flag, seal, and insignia of Anguilla. 3 bottlenose dolphins swimming in a circle. She colored the dolphins orange to represent endurance. The circle represented continuity. And though the revolution was short-lived, our listening continues. My sister has this symbol as a tattoo. It lives on as the major logo and symbol of Anguilla to this day. And that day, at the Combahee River, I was wearing my grandmother's turquoise necklace. The sun was setting, and the dolphins did indeed look orange as they swam in a circle under the Harriet Tubman Bridge and went back out to sea. Bottlenose message, speaking across revolutions. I wonder what it means for an ocean dolphin to swim up a river. The bottlenose has a range across the whole planet, the whole open ocean, and yet sometimes they will choose the boundaries and specificity of a river, brackish water, narrow shores. Why? The message for me today is about specificity, about choosing a lane with all my infinite potential, about how my world-traveling grandmother made a commitment to a small island, about how strong we grow sometimes, swimming upstream, about what the world can learn from the visibility of our message in a context that is specific enough to ring clear, and to trust that all water touches all water everywhere. And for all of you ocean dolphins wondering, what am I doing in this river full of mud? Remember why Harriet Tubman went south. She didn't have to. She was skilled, untraceable. She could have been individually free, unencumbered. But if she wanted to tell an everlasting truth about freedom that would ring across the planet, a message for the ages, she had to live free in unfree space. It was the only way to bring us all with her. Thank you, my loves, for the bravery of your freedom in spaces of clear limitation, in spaces of muddy reality. Thank you for your decisions to do not what you could do, but what you must. Thank you for teaching the difference between privilege and courage, escape and transcendence, reaction and revolution. Your endurance inscribes an eternal alternative carried by bottles and bottlenoses, blood and breath. Message honored, message received. Okay, and then one more brief passage from a later section called Practice. How did dolphins get dorsal fins anyway? Unlike fish, they don't have bones that support a dorsal fin. The mammals they evolved through and from before returning to the ocean didn't have dorsal fins. They aren't a vestige of limbs like tail flukes and side fins may be. The prevailing explanation is that dolphins evolved the dense tissue that became dorsal fins because they needed to in order to live in the wild movement of the ocean. In other words, dolphins evolved dorsal fins from practice across generations, by accepting that the ocean would always move and becoming accordingly. An embodied emphasis towards balance. That's what I'm talking about. In a context that swells and tosses me around, where I might have to pivot without much warning, what are the evolutionary practices that stabilize me and allow me to cut a path through? This is one. Daily writing is my most dependable dorsal practice. It centers me, holds me, gives me perspective on what is changing in the ocean around me. It challenges me to notice my own drift. And then a little bit later in the same section, what are your dorsal practices? What evolutionary repetitions have you cultivated to move through oceans? What are the ones you need to cultivate for the waves moving you now? So I hope those two passages just give just a little bit idea of what this book is like. It's part family history, part talking more generally about the Black experience in the U.S., dealing with some of the legacies of the transatlantic slave trade, and really some of the historical overlap between the sale of human bodies across the Atlantic and the biggest pressure of the whaling industry over those several hundred years. So it's just a really interesting blend of biology, which the biology nerd in me appreciates, and history, and then just kind of real reflection of how those historical legacies can impact people in the present. So the writing is really unique because, as I mentioned, these are essentially adapted from the social media posts that she started out with, and so they're very short snippets. And then she quite deliberately is confusing in her language about who, narrator might not be the right word because it's not a story, but kind of who is speaking, what's the perspective. So sometimes it's very clear that the perspective that she's writing from is kind of inhabiting a marine mammal perspective. Sometimes it's her perspective, like the two passages I just read are very clearly, her speaking. And sometimes it's just kind of a disembodied narrative voice. And then she ends almost every selection with very loving, calling in, positive, uplifting messages. So one thing she says in the introduction is that the phrase "I love you" is the most used phrase in this book, because after every selection, she has a paragraph that's just "I love you," and it's calling on themes from that passage. And those paragraphs are really interesting because, again, it's not clear who the I is. In some cases, it could be a dolphin. In some cases, it could be Gums herself. And in some cases, it's more of that sort of disembodied narrative voice. So it's definitely the sort of book that you don't read through in one sitting. I think it's probably most useful for just like dipping in and out, reading a selection here and there, ideally ruminating on it a little bit before moving on to the next section. So if that sounds appealing to you, I mean, this is a really cool book, and I'm definitely going to be doing that. I'm definitely going to be dipping back in the future. I think just kind of having a practice of revisiting a passage from this book every now and then would be really helpful for me, you know, as a woman and a feminist, and as somebody who's really trying to engage in anti-racist work. I think this book is a helpful off-the-wall reference and practice for that as well. So I hope maybe some of you are intrigued by this now that I've shared a little bit more about it. I do think it's worth a look if you thought this was at all interesting. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm really glad that I have it in my life. So I will stop there. I limited myself to just 2 passages for this video, but there's a lot more things that really moved me in this book. So it's possible that I'll come back again next week, not as one of my regular videos, but just as a extra video just to share another passage or something. So if you want to hear a bit more, keep an eye out for that. So thank you for watching, and if you're not subscribed to my channel and would like to see more from me, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.